action. Science that is integrative. We are talking of integrated science in different forms like natural and social science, sectors of human activities, then scholars and the practitioners of science. Science that is fundamental in terms of scale, nonlinear processes, complexity, and the unity of the nature and society. And science that is regional and place-based. None of the above is new, but together they are all new. What are the core research themes in science and technology for sustainability? Modeling the dynamic interactions between nature and society. That is one of our major requirements. Changing long-term trends in environment and development. Understanding vulnerability and resilience of places, ecosystems, and human livelihoods. Identifying limits or thresholds of serious degradation. Creation incentives to move society towards more sustainable trajectories. Provide usable knowledge to navigate the transition towards sustainability. The future Earth, as we are all going to look at, we have been debating on many of these issues for many years. Basically, we are looking at delivery of water, energy, and food for all, decarbonize socio-economic systems, safeguard the terrestrial, freshwater, and marine natural assets, build healthy, resilient, and productive cities, promote sustainable rural futures, improve human health in relation to the global environmental change, and encourage sustainable consumption and production, and increase the social resilience to future threats by building adaptive government systems. Many areas have been identified, right from agriculture to education, and these areas need to be prioritized as far as science for society is concerned. I won't go into each one of them in detail. But one typical example is agriculture, where the societal initiatives like financials and regulatory and the science and technology initiatives where you can go for precision farming and new technologies which are coming can completely transform the agriculture scenario. Much has been said about health. Yes, certainly it can certainly make a major difference if you apply science for the health purpose. There are disruptive and transformative technologies which are emerging today, and these technologies have got an impact in terms of improved productivity and competitiveness. It can create new industries and manufacturing opportunities and can provide sustainable and high quality and high wage jobs. These technologies are today transforming the entire scenario as far as the system is concerned, right from ICT to 3D printing to nanotechnologies, biotechnologies, and so on. What is the impact of this particular system in terms of economic gain? All of them will have major impact in terms of the trillions of dollars. For example, mobile internet impact is going to be annually about 3.7 to 10.8. Automation knowledge 5.2 to 6.7. So you see, each one of them have got tremendous impact as far as the economic growth and as far as the society is concerned. And that is the growth we are talking about by bringing society together. Ultimately, what it happens, so you have a scientific perspective, you have a technological perspective, and then you have an ecological, economic, and political perspective. All they fuse together in the form what we call as a science-technology society. And based on, in a society like that, if you take science-based and policy-based decisions, the society will be part of the total action. So many issues in society involve science and technology for action. What are the major drivers today? Cost and financing, laws and policies, social value, public opinion and politics, infrastructure, resource and environmental health, investment in R&D, which is a major requirement, education and literacy. I'm happy to know that there's a session on STEM here, population and demography, governance and stability. These are some of the drivers which are important. So if we want to look at today a new science policy framework, what it should have? It should be outcome driven. It should be integrated. It should be informed. It should be self-correcting, and it should recognize and respond to the inextricable links between science and technology and societal evolution. To conclude, science to take the challenge of creating new knowledge towards solving social problems. Science and technology explorations and exploitations to be in harmony with national priorities. Strategies have to be evolved jointly by experts in the field, by social activists, by bureaucrats and public in different areas like agriculture, food, water, medical, and so on. And strategy for investment and connectivity of research processes and result thereon bring in solution to the problems. Societal scientists, social scientists, and society leaders take lead for converging problem areas to workable strategies and decisions. A strong and effective science and technology base make India globally competitive and ensure national security. Knowledge generated out of science and technology has high impact on economic growth and social development, leading to improved living standards. To end, I would say building on science to see the future and through collective actions to have the future we want. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Saraswat. You were absolutely brilliant. You finished before time. That's the efficiency of member science and technology NITI Aayog. So I move on to Dr. Kiran Mazumdar now.
Thank you, Amitabh, and it's great being here for a very, very important and relevant discussion this morning. And I thought I'd basically start by saying that science and technology ought to be the principal lever of nonlinear economic growth if India aspires to be a knowledge-led growth economy. And I, for one, have always believed that investing in science and technology is not only investing for the future, but securing our future. However, when we look at what's happening today, I think all of us can agree that we are not pulling the right levers, as is evidenced from the sub 1% GDP investment in science and technology and research. And the argument of preferring other levers of growth stems from many discussions I've heard on the fact that we're not getting the true return on our investments in science and technology and research. And yet, we have powerful examples of having reaped some of the highest dividends on such investments. You know, space research is an outstanding example of such an investment where, to use Dr. Mashelkar's famous line, we have delivered handsomely on the more for less for more model, making us a world beater in satellite research and technology. And I always believed that a mission mode approach to science and technology is something which we've always done well in. You know, whether it's space research or aerospace research or atomic research or even vaccines. I mean, I think we've been very, very successful at doing this very well. But having said that, we must also admit that many of our national research institutions are pulling way below their weight. And I think the kind of investments we've made in science and technology in our research institutions have sort of let us down in many ways because they haven't really optimally delivered for us across the board. And you know, when you look across the research ecosystem in India, I personally believe that it is about leadership and autonomy. And this actually has also led to a sort of a under-resourced kind of environment in science and technology in many of our research institutes. And there are umpteen examples of how strong leadership can produce great science. And, you know, IISc, NCBS, and in more recent times, even INTEC has proved that leadership change and strong leadership can deliver very strong results. Of course, I don't want to keep talking about ISRO and many others, but I think this is really an important area for us to focus on. The other thing that we need to do in terms of science and technology is to scale up our centers of excellence. I think we often sort of try to spread ourselves too thin. We try to basically use one center of excellence and try to replicate it across the country, and we lose that opportunity to scale up these centers of excellence and scale up the scientific ecosystem. We fail to scale up the scientific critical mass and so on and so forth. So I think these are some of the things we need to think about when you're thinking about investing in science and technology. I also want to pitch upon another aspect of science and technology and economic growth. Very often we de-link science and technology from the power it has on economic growth. And I think it's very important that we learn to connect the two. Because we've seen time and time again that investing in science and technology actually creates this enormous economic growth, innovative economic growth and exponential economic growth, which is what we all want, right? And, we've also done a very inadvertently a wrong thing by not nurturing or by shall we say, getting only research institutions to focus on research. We haven't leveraged the university system and the college system for research. Why are we not getting them to have a research culture within the university system, within the college system? That whole approach to research-driven education must start much sooner than just confining it to our research centers, because that's where the collaborations need to occur. That's where we need to see a much bigger connect with society. So, I also want to basically also focus on another very important idea which I have. NITI Aayog has done a great job of creating this federal competitiveness in terms of business competitiveness. How about NITI Aayog creating this federal competitiveness in science and technology and innovation? I think that's very, very important.
Kiran, we've already done that. It will come out post-elections for all the states.
Okay, but I think you need to have a very good roadmap on how you measure this competitiveness. It's about how much you invest in science and technology, how you connect with society, how you basically create these innovation hubs, how you basically are impacting societal change through science and technology. I think we need to have measures and metrics of how we are going about this competitiveness. I just want to give you this experiment of, say, my city of Bengaluru, which I'm very proud of, because it is the science capital of the country, it is the research hub of the country, it is the innovation hub of the country. How did this happen? And I would like to share with you and think about the microcosm that has been created. There are many cities that have wonderful academic research institutes, academic institutions, entrepreneurial companies, both large and small. But what happened in Bangalore? I think we had a government which has very consistently allowed science technology policies to endure despite all the various governments that have come into force. And how did they do this? By actually partnering with private sector to create vision groups on science, technology and innovation. And I think this has worked very well because you have key stakeholders, the government, the academia and industry all coming together as stakeholders with a shared vision. How do we basically leverage science and technology to create powerful innovation? And I think we've done that very successfully. This is one state that has invested hugely into science and technology. We have created, and one thing the government of Karnataka has been told to do and has done very well is to make these investments as enabling investments and leave those institutions that it has created to be autonomous and to find strong leadership for these kind of institutions. So for instance, we created the Institute of Bioinformatics and Applied Biotechnology in Bangalore and the Center of Human Genetics. We gave them strong leadership, full autonomy, and today these are centers of excellence. The Center for Human Genetics is the only one of the few centers of its size and scale that has, although its mandate was genomics and genetics, it has focused on rare diseases. And it has got such huge knowledge built up on rare diseases that Karnataka became the first state to come up with a rare disease policy. We have also now embarked on another mission. This was the state that that very rapidly embraced the concept of participating in Science Gallery International by saying, okay, here's the money, start Science Gallery Bengaluru, which will be one of 6 science galleries around the world, along with Detroit, Dublin, London, Venice, Melbourne, and I think I might have left out a few others. But this is the way things are happening there. You need a committed government that believes that science and technology is going to lead the way. And no wonder today, more than 100 research centers of multinational companies and domestic companies are based in Bangalore, doing high-end research, using data scientists. If you look, and there's drug discovery, there is data science, there is very high-end robotics, software development, you name it, it's all happening there in Bangalore. I mean, Tesla's software is being developed in an R&D center in Bangalore, and so on and so forth. I don't want to brag about all this, but all I want to say is, how did this happen? It's because the government, in its wisdom, invested in science and technology, created strong leadership, gave autonomy, and you today have the proof of that pudding, which needs to be replicated and scaled up across the country. This is the secret recipe of making sure that our research centers, our national research centers, are given that strong leadership and given that autonomy to drive into the future. So to me, I just want to end by saying that India actually has a very rich scientific talent pool. We have to do justice to that talent pool. We have to create that virtuous ecosystem and that virtuous cycle of making sure that we invest in these scientists so that they can actually contribute to society in a much bigger way. And to me, India must pay a lot of attention to becoming a very strong member of that knowledge economy that the world is all trying to embrace. So I'll just end there, and thanks a lot.
Thanks, Kiran. You're brilliant. You're even better than Dr. Saraswat. So,
My job is to restore the balance the other way.
no, your job is that how do you create the ecosystem of Bangalore in other cities of India?
Thank you, Amitabh, and really, really great to see everyone here. And this is probably the most important topic in today's world, science and society. And I'll do very quickly address 3 points. What do we mean by science and society? Secondly, what are the challenges in India? And thirdly, what are the solutions? And we've heard a lot about both the challenges and the solutions very nicely from the 2 speakers who preceded me. Now, the simple challenge about science and society can be seen in historical perspective over the 3 industrial revolutions and now the 4th. And inventions, discoveries, knowledge propelled the first industrial revolution. Talent was critical, but also resources, mineral resources, iron ore, for example, and subsequently the use of labor to develop products and the use of markets to sell these products. This amplified over time to have societies which industrialize rapidly, to have global sources, not just local ones, of raw material, and that affected the environment hugely. But it's also transformed societies to allow people to live longer, eat better, have better lives, higher quality lives, and so on and so forth. This resulted in an asymmetric. There were countries which developed disproportionately compared to others. And as the subsequent industrial revolutions came by, these asymmetries fluctuated. Sometimes they decreased in some contexts, but by and large, they have increased. So we have a situation today where we have the so-called developed world, largely Western, which has become extremely wealthy. China and India are hugely rapidly developing economies, and they have a big challenge in this situation as they catch up on how one can develop economically, lift millions from poverty, yet not be exploitative of one's own people, peoples outside, and the earth as a whole. And this is the fundamental challenge today. Now, in that context, let's look at the challenges in India today. The opportunities are huge, but the challenges seem to be, from a science and technology perspective, which we have heard, immense. India, since independence, was founded on 3 pillars: the government, industry and civil society. And for many decades many decades after independence, our population at large had an implicit trust of government to take care of everything. Our industry was in a situation where it also relied on government to control it. This control was voluntary, and to allow it to grow. So this was the famous Bombay Plan and so on and so forth. In that situation, people were basically left industry and government to decide their future. This, of course, led to a backlash of civil society coming up and demanding inclusiveness in the results of development, but also a demand that civil society should set the stage for what happens. And this has resulted in a set of laws and rules and regulations which have taken the pendulum to one end. These are very valid and important rules and regulations, but these effectively have resulted in making industry and government hamstrung in larger development plans. So the lack of inclusiveness of all these three pillars early on has led to the pendulum going into a situation now where we bemoan our inability to take on large-scale solutions anchored in science and technology in many cases to many of our problems. Because for every kind of discussion we have, there will be a group which will give a veto on how we should not go forward this way or not go forward that way. And we bemoan again how, countries which are not democratic have the flexibility of doing so, and how the challenge is how can we as a democracy go forward. But there is a fourth pillar which can come in and solve this problem. It's very rare in human history that science and technology becomes a critical factor in providing solutions. It happens once in a few decades or a few centuries, and this is such a time. And it has happened for a few very interesting reasons. In our trying to understand nature's engineering, how we came about on this planet, how different kinds of animals came about, we have understood biology to a level where we can actually also become nature's engineers. But in addition, our natural evolution and the evolution of our brain has resulted in technologies which we have developed, which have changed the planet inexorably. But these very changes, which have wrought major environmental problems, also today provide ways of solutions, such as our new ways of using energy and our new ways of dealing with technology, new ways of dealing with waste, agriculture, health, and so on and so forth. And therefore, we now have a stewardship for the planet anchored in science and technology. And I'll take the point what Kiran said about levers of government or other kinds of ways of having change in society, to say that the levers of government, for that to be effective, need a very strong fulcrum. And that fulcrum is science and technology. And for that fulcrum to be effective, it needs to be strengthened, so the foundations have to be strong, and it needs to be placed in the right position so that the levers can operate. And Dr. Saraswat pointed out many ways by how these levers can actually operate. So I'll end by saying, what is the solution? How can we strengthen these levers? First of all, we need to embark on a large-scale education program so that science for the people and people for science is really a demand. And this means that language of science should be such that it's accessible to a very large number of people. Our state universities, where 95% of our students go, should be more active in science and so on. That's the education agenda which we can talk about. Our institutions in cities such as Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, and so on need to serve as hubs to work with each other more, work with industry, and to reach out as spokes to the entire country and indeed the entire world in partnership, so that our foundations can go to the next level of interactions with industry, economy, and the society. And finally, as scientists, we need to drive to take on major missions, not only missions in science, but integrate into national missions of various kinds. The health missions, the Swachh Bharat mission, Amitabh has been pioneering going to aspirational districts, and there are immense scientific and technological opportunities there, both for basic understanding and implementing change. So this pyramid which has the foundation of education and training, strengthening our hubs, and finally integrating to big missions can be a very strong fulcrum on which we can integrate change. Last and quick point, Kiran rightly pointed out the major successes of places such as Bangalore. And since I'm also from Bangalore, she will not mind my being critical of such developments while praising its successes. What has happened in Bangalore is amazing, but what has happened in Bangalore is essentially also accidental for a variety of reasons. And thus, accidents take a long time to happen. If one were a little more active, instead of an accidental miracle happening, we can have in multiple locations an exponential change happening. Tarun pointed out how industry doesn't interact with academia. There's good reason for that, because industry in India has capital but doesn't have risk capital. And therefore that risk must be mitigated for the interaction. Industry needs to survive, and it's pushing for survival rather than a futuristic way. That can come through a partnership through our national laboratories, which have extraordinary talent, extraordinary resources, but can mitigate the risk by having joint mechanisms of partnership. Such partnerships, which can also have international collaborators, have been done in places such as in the UK. The Catapult program takes adventurous, new avenues to go ahead. So these kinds of new ways can bring industry and academia together. That's something which we're pushing. All the metrics which Kiran pointed out, Dr. Saraswat, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Amitabh, Kant have pushed the development of ways by which one can assess our ecosystem better. Those programs are going on, and therefore stimulus to help people understand what the inputs are, what the outputs are being put in place, and that will allow us to actually affect these changes. So thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we are at 10:22, and I'll open it up for question answers. You'll never get this opportunity to grill Dr. Saraswat, Kiran, and Dr. VijayRaghavan again. So please ask very sharp, very pinpointed questions, no long lectures, no long statements that you want to change the world. Just grill them. So straight away, I'm opening it up for question answers. Yeah, please.
My name is Prithviraj Chaudhary from the Harvard Business School. So my question is actually to Mr. Kant and the rest of the panel.
You're not supposed to ask.
I'll do it anyway. So I study talent, and especially the migration of talent across geographies. And one program that has fascinated me from China is the 1,000 Talents program, which was started about 10 years back. About 7,000 scientists, both Chinese migrants as well as foreigners, have moved back. And the program, by all accounts, has been a great success. To Kiran's point, they have launched about 20 new drugs, all worked on by these foreign scientists. And I would argue that the Bangalore story also has a migration bit, where domestic talent is converging. So in the spirit of today's session, I wonder whether the NITI Aayog, and more broadly, we are thinking about how to bring back Indian scientists working all over the world, even if for a few years. And the benefits I see are twofold. One, there's transfer of knowledge across borders, but there's also recombination of ideas. So CSIR scientists here are working on something, the return migrants could bring something else, and maybe we create a bigger sort of recombined set of knowledge.
So great idea. Meet me right after this. Come to NITI Aayog, work with us. We'll take this forward for implementation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I just want to add to that, saying that there is actually a very positive signs that we are seeing of migrating scientists wanting to come back to India and doing something exciting. So I think it is happening, but as Amitabh said, I think it would be great to really augment it at scale.
Yeah. No, we'll be very happy to work in partnership with you. Next question, please.
I'm Dr. Selvamurthy. The scientific social responsibility which Honorable Prime Minister articulated in the Indian Science Congress, the Department of Science and Technology is already taking some initiatives. So how do you translate that into an application and also strategies to connect the society with the scientists? Like all the S&T departments, including strategic departments, can we mandate them when a project is getting sanctioned, what relevance it has to the society? So besides asking the scientific innovations, so the STI policy also of the DST states this. So only thing to translate that into actions and strategies, I would suggest that the specific instructions to not only the S&T departments at the central level, even state councils, S&T councils at the state level, they must have this as one column, that what is its relevance to the society, so that this becomes operational. That's one suggestion. The second is education. Education at school level, we should connect with society, because when you see the theoretical, the information load which we give it to the children, but we are really not connecting them. They are not getting into slums, they are not getting to rural areas, they are not getting exposed to realities of life, including people at the bottom of the pyramid. So I would suggest that these two suggestions that connect
So,
the
you know, the
education.
second bit, I'll tell you that there's a session later in the day where a lot of work on this has been done by Atal Tinkering Labs. We've opened close to 3,000 tinkering labs where we're providing robots, 3D printers, Internet of Things, all at school level from class 6 onwards. And our objective is that in the next 3 to 4 years, we should be able to scale it up to about 10,000 schools in India. And we are seeing a huge amount of innovative spirit of India at a young age there. But I'll open your question to Dr. Saraswat.
I think after the Prime Minister's discourse in the Science Congress, and later on with many scientists of this country, there has been a great transformation which is taking place today in terms of how the science is being managed through the universities into national laboratories and others. The major transformation which is taking place is that all these institutions have been now asked to do translational research rather than going into the basic research, which was not so much relevant. And relevance has been actually factored. Today, all the new programs which the government of India is sanctioning, whether it's cyber physical systems or artificial intelligence or either e-mobility, in each case, there is a major initiative for innovation. And this innovation is being categorized and upgraded through the process of setting up of the various institutions like research parks in IIT Chennai and IIT Bombay and other places, which are doing wonderful work in translating the ideas and the thoughts which are coming from the industrialist into the university and vice versa. So there's a big bridge which has been set up today, and I think we will be seeing the results in the near future.
I just want to caution us not to just focus on applied and translational research. I think basic research is going to be vital for our future. So let's not take this either or approach. I think we need both. And I think each research center has its own capabilities and excellence in any of these areas. So I personally believe we should not miss out on basic research, which I think used to be a huge, skill and capability of Indian scientists, until we only started focusing on applied research. So I think there's a danger in only focusing on applied research. I don't know what Vijay thinks.
No, I think this is not the right understanding of the subject. It is not that we are going to stop the basic research. Basic research has to be relevant basic research. And that is the point which has been highlighted by the Prime Minister's oil. What used to happen, just let me complete. What used to happen is most of our basic research used to be additive and repetitive. I think that part has to be disclosed out of it, the entire thing. We should do basic research which is relevant to the society.
I don't agree with that, sir, because there is no such thing as relevant basic research. Basic research starts with an idea. It becomes very relevant as it develops. I don't think you can, when you start basic research, you can decide whether it's going to be relevant or not. I mean, basic research leads to amazing things. I mean, today you might be doing research on studying some genetic knockout system in a zebra fish, which you might think is not relevant, but tomorrow it cures diseases.
So Kiran's getting all the clapping, huh?
That is because I think we have always lived into the realm of basic research in India has been outstanding. But as a scientist, I can mention to you, basic research in India has been repetitive and additive, and that one has to acknowledge that fact. Otherwise, we would have had not all the Nobel laureates of India coming from the foreign soil and not from the Indian soil. So please understand the fact of life, that It is not a great basic research which the Indian community has done. It is basically repetitive and additive. What government wants to do is do basic research, but it should lead to the economic growth.
Dr. VijayRaghavan, you want to intervene in this debate?
No, I think I must, you know,
And whose side are you on?
I was just going to say, I must congratulate Dr. Saraswat and Kiran for taking this on, you know, frontally. You know, my view is, I see, by the way, points in both. Let me just summarize it in a context about India. Our basic research, historically, has come from, been inspired from people such as J.C. Bose and others who were titans of that time. And as institutional growth developed, the CSIRs, our national institutes, our universities, and so on, we also grew in volume in addition to growing in quality. And I think India has, much to be proud of in our basic research. And there's no question that Indians and our basic science are respected all the world over. Yet we must take Dr. Saraswat's point a little more in a nuanced manner and critically. And he is asking, what has basic science in India achieved globally? And the point is, we're not talking about basic science everywhere. I mean, there's fundamental, the foundations are absolutely necessary. Could basic science in India have contributed more? And I think there's an important intellectual challenge which Indian scientists have. Have we been, as basic scientists, adventurous enough in tackling such problems that we are in the front line? Now, this is a big challenge. It's not something which we need to be afraid of being self-critical about, because remember, the kinds of investments in basic science globally are several hundred times more than what countries such as India are making or can make. Google's investment in basic science, for example, is more than the entire National Science Foundations. Our question, therefore, is to ask that given our context, our social and economic context, what is the meaning of basic science in this situation? I think Venki Ramakrishnan, who is now the president of the Royal Society, summed this up really well when he was asked what kind of science India should do, basic or applied or this or that. He first of all started by saying, he's been out of India for such a long time, and he's not an Indian, but then typically he actually provided an answer. He said that we should either address the world's best problems and be competitive in addressing those problems.
That's true.
Or we should choose problems here which the rest of the world also looks at as basic important problems and do that. And he said, politely, in a British manner, that we seem to be doing neither. We are following the problems defined by world leaders in science for a variety of real reasons, maybe. We are a small scientific community, all said and done. Those are huge scientific communities. But even if we follow the ideas, the problems set by others, are we world class on that? Now that's a bit of a challenge. So I admire the necessity of basic science. I admire the value of basic science. I myself am a basic scientist, and no one questions the value of that. And when we talk about basic science in a relevant context, what we mean is it inspirational? Is it intellectually leading? Is it choosing problems which are world-class problems, or is it following? There have been extraordinary exceptions in Indian basic science, people who have chosen problems independent, on their own or in our context. And these are, these can be mathematicians, these can be technologists, the whole range. It's not that, mathematicians can't be original. Indian mathematicians are Indian. Indian musicians are Indian. But it's not that they're doing anything which is not world class. So that can be done. I'll end by saying there's a phenomenal example of how one can be original in our context. And that requires a certain daring, and that daring needs to come as a community and not just as brilliant individuals. Chandrasekhar's Nobel Prize winning work on the nature of black holes was an idea which he formulated and wrote down after he was an undergraduate in India on a ship to England. This is before he went to Europe. It was a problem, a world-class problem,
which he attacked in a world-class way. Raman's work is another example. Bose's work are other examples, and these are exceptional individuals. Now we today have a challenge that as a community to do that. Have we done that? We have done that in some examples. Dhurandhar and Iyer's work on gravitational waves about 20 years ago was important. Vishweshwaraya's work on gravitational waves 20 years ago were important. Obaid Siddiqui's pioneering work in neurogenetics set the stage for development of institutions. We should celebrate that. But all these examples are individuals who came up because of their fire in the belly, but not an institutional ecosystem fire in the belly. And that's what is missing, and that's what we need to push. So I don't think, Kiran and Dr. Saraswat are, saying anything wrong or right. It is that together, if you distill out those two separate points, there is much to do and much to be proud of, but there's much to do.
Okay, question there.
Yes, hello. Question regarding bridge building and international collaboration, which was addressed in the beginning. How do you see in India that such things as IP rights, but also data integrity, can facilitate international collaboration, investing more in R&D in India, and also Indian companies be able to take these investments abroad? Because those two hurdles, I understand, has been in the past, both the IP right and the data security and integrity.
So I think Kiran will have some points to say there, but there are two questions, intellectual property and data, and I'll be very brief on both. India is a signatory to WIPO and World Trade Organization intellectual property issues. So there is no conflict over there. Problems come up, and we must make a distinction between intellectual property discussions which are about intellectual property and intellectual property discussions which are actually trade wars, right? And which can be seen very simply by inverting the protagonists and asking what view would you take, right? And you find typically that dominant players globally have a certain view about intellectual property, and Indian players who are growing have another view. And whether that is a trade dispute or an intellectual dispute can be seen by inverting that, and both matter. Data, again, is a similar issue, right? The big data players will always have the resources and the wealth to formulate structures which benefit them. There will also be components which are sensible hidden in that, and which is the right kind of balance countries such as India need to take. And what's happening in data today is something which the NITI Aayog, with its artificial intelligence policy, with its data policy, is pushing to ensure that the data is distilled and used and fed back to people, and with the stakeholders getting value without compromising its use, but also has a level of protection.
Okay, Kiran, quickly.
No, I couldn't have said it better. I think it's a perception issue. I think it is a case of, is it intellectual property or is it a trade war? Or is, that's really the debate we need to have in a very fair way. Because I think a lot of what you're talking about is Western perception of how they perceive intellectual property being used in India. And I can tell you, as signatories of WIPO, I think there is a very strong respect and recognition of fair patenting laws.
Yeah, last question here.
So I'm going to take you at your word to put the speakers on the spot. And I wanted to ask each of you, if there was one concrete change that you would want to see in the next 3 years, what would it be?
Yeah, so quickly, please. I have very little time. I want to finish before time.
Okay. I'll summarize this by saying that, as scientists, we need to be citizens first. And that, as a bus conductor in Delhi said many years ago, if you want change, bring change.
Yes.
Right? So we need to be participating in that change.
Yeah, I just think we need to really focus on connecting science and society in a big way. I think we need to definitely invest a lot more in science, and I think we need to celebrate science a lot more.
I would also like to contribute in the same way by saying that what we have been doing in science is not enough. So in terms of investment in science, I want to see a great change in the next 3 years. 0.7 or 0.8% of the GDP. If it becomes even 1.2%, I'll be very happy.
So I'm going to just conclude, and I just want to say that, all these countries which have grown at rapid rates of 10% plus, starting with Japan, Taiwan, Korea, South Korea, recent times China, all grew at rapid rates, 10% plus for long periods of time. They've all effectively used science to fuel growth. And without that, it would not have been possible all across these countries. And if India wants to grow rapidly at 10% plus so that it can have investable surplus for distributed equity, none of these schemes which are being talked about will not be feasible without growing at high rates. We need to do this. I was reading this really wonderful book by Kai-Fu Lee on artificial intelligence superpower, on how China is beating America at this game. And, almost 60% of the artificial intelligence capital has flowed into China during 2017. It's an amazing story of how Chinese entrepreneurs who were copycats till yesterday have worked with data scientists to create lean startups with market-driven mentality, new products, and are beating Silicon Valley in cutting-edge technology. It's an amazing story, and I would advise all of you to read this, all of you, because without working with scientists in different areas, it will be very difficult to make a breakthrough. And I'm making this point because in many areas, our process of growth has just begun. I mean, urbanization, because cities account, while they account for just 3% of the Earth landmass, account for 80% of the global GDP. The process of urbanization has ended across USA, it's ended across Europe, it's nearing completion in China. In India, it's just begun. And how we urbanize in an innovative, sustainable manner, how we clean up our air in our cities, how we recycle water, how we recycle waste, all this rapid pace of innovative, sustainable urbanization will not be possible without working in very close interaction with science. I work on this other program of aspirational districts where we look at 115 districts of India which have remained backward. We don't call them backward, we call them aspirational. I mean, 1 in 2 women being anemic in India, 1 in 3 children being stunted, 1 in 4 being wasted. There's a huge challenge to the scientific community, and there's a huge challenge to society, and there's a huge challenge for all of us on health outcomes. Each one of the health outcomes we perform very poorly. Education, learning outcomes, on agriculture productivity. All these require massive levels of technological leapfrogging. Without technological leapfrogging, India just cannot catch up. And without catching up, that catching up can only be done by scientific community working in very close collaborative partnership with entrepreneurs. And to my mind, without this very close convergence between entrepreneurs and scientific community, we will not be able to make the right breakthrough. The government has done a lot. Let me tell you this, because this issue of IPR was raised. IPR, we came out with a new intellectual property right policy in 2016. We've introduced patent, trademark, and design applications which are processed end-to-end electronically. We've given a special provision for startups where we give 80% rebate for patents and 50% rebates. And you can do all this on video conferencing. In trademarks, 74 existing forms have been replaced by one form. And from around 30% in 2014, e-filing of patent and trademark application has gone to about 91%. Now the time taken, and we are beating USA and Japan at it now, time taken for trademark examination has been brought down from over 13 months to just 1 month. And in patents, the shortest patent granted while it has gone up by 4 times, if you compare it with 2013-14, we are clearing patent applications in about less than a year's time. And the shortest time taken for grant of patent has just been
81 days from the request of examination. So huge number of new staff has been taken. We've collaborated with ITIs, with IITs, and massive work has been done around this area. So patent, trademarks, a lot of work has been done. I would only like to say one more thing, and that is that quite often in India we keep getting into sunset areas of industries, and it's very important that we get into sunrise areas. If India is to make major breakthroughs, there are huge work which needs to be done in areas of renewable, in areas of mobility, electric vehicles, in areas of battery storage, flash charging, swapping, many areas. We need massive amount of work for India to grow at high rates and to do sustainable development. And all this requires great amount of work with scientists and scientists working for society, not working in isolation in CSIR labs, working in sunrise areas of growth so that India can radically transform itself. And I find many startups doing this. Tricog does this using artificial intelligence for cardiac diagnosis. SatShow does it for agriculture. Vasav does it for agriculture. Imbibe uses artificial intelligence. Young Girl using artificial intelligence to improve learning outcomes, tracking every student latitudinally and longitudinally in the state of Rajasthan and showing massive results. So actually the scientific community, to my mind, instead of just being in the CSIR labs, needs to move out and work with many entrepreneurs to make India grow rapidly, cause disruption, and without that, it will be very difficult for India to grow at rates of 10% plus. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And Tarun, for your information, we've finished 2 minutes before time.
Well, thank you all. There's a small tea break outside, though we intend to start at 11 sharp, so if you must stretch, please stretch and come right back in. Thank you. Thank you all, the panelists here.